There's a feeling, the pulse of eternal knowledge. When you sense the oneness, you are with us. We brought life to Earth. You can't see us, but we flourish all around you, everywhere, in everything, and even inside you, whether you believe in us or not. From your first breath to your last, in darkness and in the light, we are the oldest and youngest. We are the largest and smallest. We are the wisdom of 1 billion years. We are creation. We are resurrection, condemnation, and regeneration. We are mushrooms.
Mushrooms are very clandestine and very much the trickster. So they're hiding from you all the time. We're in Agarikon territory now. There's some big living snags up here. It's always interesting and exhilarating to be in the old growth forest, but not always rewarding in accomplishing our mission to find a new Agarikon strain. But nevertheless, it beats being in the office. Fungi are the grand molecular decomposers of nature. Now, what does that mean? Well, they break down wood. And here I'm laying in the forest. I haven't peaked yet, but here's a piece of wood laying down on the ground. If I was laying down on the ground and I died, fungi would leap up to recycle me. Well, that's the way of nature. Mushrooms represent rebirth, rejuvenation, regeneration. Fungi generate soil that gives life. The task that we face today is to understand the language of nature. My mission is to discover the language of nature of the fungal networks that communicate with the ecosystem. And I believe nature is intelligent. The fact that we lack the language skills to communicate with nature does not impugn the concept that nature is intelligent. It speaks to our inadequacy for communication. If we don't get our act together and come in commonality and understanding with the organisms that sustain us today, not only will we destroy those organisms, but we will destroy ourselves.
Mushroom, not like a vegetable, and it's not like an animal, but it's somewhere in between. The fungus is its own kingdom altogether. There's over 1.5 million species. That's 6 times more than plants. Of all those species of fungi, about 20,000 produce mushrooms. And mushrooms come in an incredible diversity of shapes and sizes and colors and lifestyles. There are even bioluminescent mushrooms. A lot of people are afraid of mushrooms. People associate mushrooms and fungi, mold, with death and decay, which makes sense. There's a lot of fear because of fungi's role in the cycle of life. They decompose dead and dying organisms and move all those nutrients back into the cycle. They kind of are at the very end of stuff, but they're also at the beginning.
Once you start working with mushrooms, you get drawn in. A really important difference between plants and fungi is that plants have evolved to catch your eye. When a tomato gets red, it is saying, hey, I'm ready, come get me. The mushrooms don't give a shit. They're doing their own thing. And a lot of them are hiding. Every time you pick up a mushroom, you are faced with the omnivore's dilemma. Do I know enough to eat this? Should I eat this? Will this kill me?
And that's one of the reasons why people are freaked out about mushrooms, because there are ones that can kill you. There are some that'll take out your liver or your kidneys. But to be honest with you, there's berries in the woods that can kill you too. So it's really a matter of knowing your mushrooms. There's a huge subculture of mycophiles, of people who are fascinated with mushrooms. They hunt mushrooms together and they eat mushrooms together, and they're sort of bloated pleasure seekers with a scientific bent. Really my kind of crap.
This is a tricholoma.
Rafola frondosa.
This is Fortinarius lordogriseus.
Garricus bisporus.
That's a cladonia lichen.
So I started attending these festivals and forays and learning more and more. It changed the way I saw everything. Mushrooms actually were the window by which I came to understand nature in a deeper way.
If we didn't have fungi, we would get this buildup of plant matter that would choke the earth. They really are the key. They break down plant life and make it usable for new plant life and for animal life.
They are the digestive tracts of the forest. One of the lifestyles of fungi is the decomposers, called saprobes, or rotters, if you want. The yeasts and molds used in making beer and wine and cheese are all saprobes. That's actually a penicillin mold in Gorgonzola and Roquefort. Bourbon is fungi fermented corn. But this ability to break things down is a talent, if you will, that can be harnessed to help us deal with some of our problems like pollution. These rotters, they can break down anything that's natural. That's what they've evolved to do. Anything that's hydrocarbon based. So that includes stuff like oil spills, pollutant problems. That's kind of the truth of it.
I was a part of this experiment. There were 4 piles saturated with diesel and other petroleum waste. One was a control pile. One pile was treated with enzymes. One pile treated with bacteria, and our pile we inoculated with mushroom spores. The fungi absorbs the oil. So the fungi is producing enzymes, peroxidases, that break carbon-hydrogen bonds. These are the same bonds that hold hydrocarbons together. So the fungi become saturated with the oil. And then when we return 6 weeks later, all the tarps were removed. All the other piles were dead, dark, and stinky. We came back to our pile, was covered with hundreds of pounds of oyster mushrooms. Some of these mushrooms are very happy mushrooms. They're very large. They're showing how much nutrition that they could have obtained. But something else happened, which is an epiphany in my life. They sporulated. The spores attract insects. Birds then came bringing in seeds, and our pile became an oasis of life.
Mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of fungi. So mushroom is like the apple. The bulk of the organism is growing underground, and it's composed of these long threads. And these threads grow one cell at a time, and then they branch and rebranch, growing in every direction they can, even 3-dimensionally. And that mass of threads is called a mycelium.
Stick falls onto the ground, I pull it up, and there's mycelium. It is virtually everywhere.
A mycelium has more networks than our brain has neural pathways, and works in much the same way with electrolytes, electrical pulses. They're the most common species on Earth. They're everywhere.
Just to give you an idea of how much fungi are in the forest, as you're walking, there's about 300 miles of fungi
Under every footstep that you take, and that's all over the world.
and they form these massive links. It's like a big web just growing through the forest.
Mycelium that can grow out even just this big and have trillions, literally trillions of end branches. Almost everyone knows about the computer internet. The mycelium shares the same network design.
Trees are communicating using the mycelium as pathways. They're connecting one tree to another. They're using the mycelium too to feed one another. In other words, one tree can swap nutrients with another tree using mycelium as the passageway.
So we often think of kin recognition as an animal behavior. Humans, we love our babies. We know it's our baby and we're going to look after that baby. But we never thought that plants could do that. But we're finding in our research that plants can recognize their own kin. So these mother trees recognize their kin through their mycorrhizal networks. The mother tree and the baby seedlings are sending signals, talking to each other. When they're connected together and carbon is moving between plants, the trees are supporting the weaker ones. If she knows that there's pests around and that she's under danger, she will increase her competitive environment towards her own babies so that they regenerate further away. It's a magical thing. And this could not happen without the fungi.
I'm not the super idealist tree hugger. I do hug trees occasionally, I do confess to that. But I was a logger, I cut the woods. Damn, we got a 2-for-1 on that one. Cutting down these trees and we're gonna let them rot. But we're letting them rot with a purpose. We're letting them rot with shiitake mushrooms, which are delicious and medicinal.
Yeah. September 74, Paul was working as a logger in Darien. I went up to visit him one weekend and we were out walking in the woods and I started showing him all these mushrooms. He said, what are those? And I started looking at mushrooms for the first time. We came around the corner and there's this purple mushroom. I'd never seen one like that before. It was just like this huge epiphany, like, woo, 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 and that's where it began. He just never stopped.
These are old red velvet polypores, elegant Clipris. It's got a furry stomach. This is a delicious shrimp russula mushroom, edible and choice, and grows here in the old growth forest.
It's rare in science you have such powerful amateurs. The meaning of the word amateur is a lover, and he loves his mushrooms. And he's proven that amateurs can do really credible, important research. And that used to be the case. The 19th century, obviously, was full of great amateur naturalists, Darwin being one of them.
He's handed over to this universal consciousness. That's where genius comes from. Every magnificent thing that humans have ever achieved comes from that place.
I grew up in a small town called Columbiana, Ohio. Very conservative, very religious. And my brother John went to Yale, and my brother Bill went to Cornell. So we were an academic family. But I had a severe stuttering habit that
greatly interfered with my ability to express myself. I went through 6 years of speech therapy. I could not speak a single sentence without stuttering profusely. And nothing in speech therapy could help me. I couldn't look at people in the eyes. So all my life, I stared at the ground. Anybody came up to me, I'd stare at the ground. I found fossils and mushrooms.
We are all of the stars. My kingdom was born from the heavens 4.5 billion years ago. We are the pioneers. We climbed out of the sea to create the fertile soil and set the stage for all of life.
In South Africa, in the sediments of lava, they have found fungus-like organisms, mycelium fossils in the lava, 2.4 billion years old. This is the oldest record of a multicellular organism on Earth. This year, another fossil was found in the sediments of Brazil. It's 113 million years old, and it's a perfectly shaped mushroom. We divided from fungi about 650 million years ago. One branch led to fungi, the other branch led to animals. We chose the path of encirculating our nutrients in a cellular sac, a stomach. The mycelium remained underground, externally digesting its nutrients. Biodiversity surged. So we had these great cataclysmic extinction events. When the asteroids impacted the Earth, bam, enormous amounts of debris was jettisoned in the atmosphere. Sunlight was cut off. Plants die, animals die. And fungi inherited the Earth. From these extinction events, there's one lesson. Those organisms that paired with fungi survived. We are more closely related to fungi than we are to any other kingdom. What this means is that we are descendants of mycelium. Mycelium is the mother of us all.
Living creatures like fungi are intelligent in the sense that they respond to their environment, they seek out food, and they defend themselves. They solve problems. And that's intelligence.
A mycelium can theoretically live forever, as long as it has food to grow into, which is why the oldest and largest organism on Earth is a fungus. It lives on top of a mountain in Oregon. It's like thousands of acres and it's thousands of years old. The mushroom is the organ of sexual reproduction for the spore of the fungus. Fungi don't have seeds, they have spores. The spores are extremely tiny, little lightweight gene carrying systems. When they land on something they can eat, they break down the food that they're on and then reabsorb the nutrients because you need to move on to find another place where there's food. The mushroom releases zillions of spores into the atmosphere. There's so many spore. I mean, you take one breath, you just breathed in 10 fungal spore. So they are everywhere. We've evolved with them.
When you see what mushrooms do, it's kind of spooky in the most wonderful way. I mean, they correct everything on Earth. They support life, they convert life, they carry life, They're remarkable beings. If humans become extinct, what's the next species that will take over the Earth? Maybe mycelium already are the dominant species, not just because they're the most common species on Earth, they're everywhere. You look at humans, there's 7 billion of us, but we're just one little creature wandering around incredibly vulnerable and don't survive easily if we're assaulted.
Hurricane Harvey has started to make landfall here on the Texas coast. More than 30,000 people are without power, and things are only expected to get worse.
Puerto Rico has had the worst storm in about a century, and it is struggling to understand the new normal of months ahead without basic services.
Climate change is one of the biggest threats to our present world, to the future of our planet.
CO2 is our biggest greenhouse gas. As plants photosynthesize, they literally inhale CO2 while exhaling oxygen. CO2 is what plants photosynthesize, and they take that carbon and they put it in different places. They put it in their leaves and their trunks, but they put 70% of it we're finding below ground. And the root systems trade that carbon for nutrients. The carbon ends up in the fungal cell walls where it's stored. This fuels the microbial community and all the other parts of the food web, like the mites and nematodes, and they start cycling nutrients through that eating process. So the fungi are really important in stabilizing carbon in soils. Once the carbon is stable, it can stay there stored for thousands of years. We know, for example, that carbon can move from plant to plant, and it evens out the distribution of carbon in that system. They're working really hard. If we maintain the plants, the forest, and the natural fungal community, we've got a natural engine that's just storing carbon below ground. So it's essential. You know, it's there for us, right? It's right in front of us.
We do more than make mushrooms. We have the ability to do so much more than just break down matter. Like the fruit of our labor, most of you have only scratched the surface of our usefulness. We are the changers.
I was 14 or 15 years of age, I believe,